What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel. I'm Keith and I make board games for a living, and that's why I like to pay close attention to what Magic the Gathering is doing. It's, pays value to see what some of the big dogs are working on and where people are complaining because there might be gaps that need to be filled, and a new product or a new game or a new idea might perfectly fit in there. And so I pay a lot of attention to Commander and Brawl, which are kind of like the two big, more casual 100 card singleton, interesting deck building challenge formats, and Commander definitely being the main way that people are playing the game now. And I have beef. You may have seen in a previous video I talked about how there were no good Teamer Commanders, and everyone wanted to fight me in the comments, and you were all wrong. And I realized I didn't explain my criteria for what makes a good commander. So we're going to do that, and then we're also going to look at every single 3-color pair to see what most fits that criteria for each color, and then you will find out that there are no good Esper Commanders, there are no good Teamer Commanders, and there are no good Grixis Commanders. So let's talk about it. Let's open with the criteria. What makes a good commander? It must cost 3 or 4, and my preference is 4, and that's more of a game timing thing. It is 3 colors. Now, this one we will elaborate on a little bit in the future, but I personally believe playing commander, you must play a 3-color commander. I think mono and 2 colors just excludes too much from what I enjoy about the game. I think 3 colors is the way to go. Harken back to the classic, you must play an Elder Dragon, which is 3 colors. Isn't even really the reason, but I like that also. Has an impact on cast. Is really important. If I play my guy and it does nothing, why did I play my guy? And has a lasting effect while in play. And then the last one is helps communicate a game plan for deck building. If your commander is telling you it wants to be doing something or it needs friends to help it do something, you have to build the deck around that. So let's dive into this criteria a little bit more, starting with cost 3 or 4. A single piece of ramp gets them down earlier on turn 2 or turn 3 so that they are the star of the show. If you're playing this guy, this is your favorite guy, this is the commander, the boss, the chief, you want to play that card. It should be present for most of the game. It should interact with things for most of the game. If it costs 7, you're going to see it maybe after the game has ended, according to what bracket you might be in. That seems bad. And so having them be well costed, I think, is really important to keep them happening, keep them doing stuff while you're trying to play the game. But also, recasting them a second or third time isn't backbreaking. If I have a guy that costs 3, it's then 5, it's then 7. And when you're playing it for 7, you're like, is this really going to be worth 7, or do I just have nothing else going on? Whereas if you have a 7 mana commander, casting it the second time after it came down and did nothing, it's really a slog. It's really hard to want to commit to doing that kind of thing, especially if it has no immediate game impact. Now let's talk about is 3 colors. So multicolored cards are fun and interesting, and if you are playing 3 colors, it gives you access to 3 guilds. So for example, if I'm playing Jeskai, I have access to Boros, I have access to Azorius, and I have access to Izzet colored cards, which I think is really important. Oftentimes I'll be playing a thing, it's like, oh yes, excellent, this key piece or this exact solution to a problem I'm having is just not in the colors that I want because I'm playing a 2-color thing. Or Tanuk is one of my favorite cards come out of Edge of Eternities, except it's just green-red. And if I could add blue to that, that would be one of the best commanders. And that's kind of the problems I'm having with this here. And I made a video about Tanuk specifically when it was first spoiled to be like, hey, why can't we just have partners for everything if it's a relatively cheap costed card? Because that would solve my Tanuk problem. But coming back to my point, a lot of times a particular keyword or strategy has key pieces in an off color. Now, my favorite example for this is Golgari Self-Mill, which is really, really present, especially in Ravnica and stuff like that. But there's just so many blue cards that give you so much more gas, so much more action. For example, I like a lot of the cards that exist would say you don't lose the game when you have no cards in your library. For example, Out of the Tombs, which is in black, and Stillness in Motion, which is in blue. Or you can look at stuff like Glimpse the Unthinkable to mill yourself for 10 cards, which is in blue. Or if you are not playing black, you lose stuff like Overlord of the Baelmerk, and you're kind of just wishing you had access to so many more of these cards to help your strategy be more consistent. And I think that more variation in the gameplay because your strategy becomes less needle thin. And I think Tifa is a perfect example of this. She's mono green, and she says, play lots of lands and I will attack and kill players. And then every single time you play it after the first time, you're like, oh, I just did the exact same thing as the first game. I just played lots of lands and I killed the player. And the ordering and how that happens is kind of different, but you're not interacting with the game in a different and unique way. You're doing the exact same thing every time. And that's kind of my complaint about playing monocolored strategies, is they're too needle thin. Has an impact on cast is the next criteria. So if your commander enters and dies immediately, it feels bad because it's a wasted turn. Your guy, he's the boss. He's the star of the show. He didn't do anything, which sucks big time. Because it's supposed to be the star of the show. You picked this guy to be your commander. You want him to do stuff. So if your commander does not have an impact on cast, it's difficult to choose to play it when you are behind. I had this moment happen to me recently. I really like Narcy Fablesinger. She says, when your saga's complete, your opponents take damage and you gain life. And when you sacrifice an enchantment, you draw a card. So when she enters, she does nothing, and if people kill her, I'm like, well, I should have spent that turn playing a saga instead, and then playing her right before a saga ticks off. But that's still, like, I can't play Narcy before a saga ticks off on the same turn. It has to be the turn before, and so there's just no good time to play Narcy Fablesinger, which is kind of the problem. She does not have an impact on cast, so she will not be found in this list, unfortunately, as much as I love her. And then has a lasting effect while in play. So if your commander does something, it does try and survive a turn. People don't bolt it immediately. It should do something beyond its initial impact, and beyond just like, oh, I hit you for 1 and I get a little bit of combat damage, and oh, commander, it's getting close to 21. It's kind of not enough. So usually this is in the form of a whenever clause that triggers on an action, but also there's a lot of more modern design which says enters or attacks. So it has an effect when it does something, and it will continue to do that every turn. And there just isn't enough cards that have this. And again, I want to preface that when people looked at the last video, that, oh, there's no good Teemo Commander, they were like, oh my god, I'm playing a bad Teemo Commander. I'm having the worst time. That's not the point of this video. The point of this video is I want more cards designed according to these guidelines, instead of saying that you shouldn't be playing the other ones, because it's not going to be less fun, it's not going to be bad. But some of these problems exist where you play your guy and it does nothing, and you go, oh, why did you kill my guy? I didn't get to do anything with it yet. And they're like, well, yeah, but when you do, it's strong or whatever. There's no exchange here. And that sucks, and I want to have more stuff work like this because it creates a more fun experience, in my opinion. So yes, there is stuff that is exceptions to these rules, which are great, but I think these are important, and I want more cards like this. But the last point is helps communicate a plan for deck building. Normally this resolves around having a major mechanic or a theme that the deck is going to rely on to make the commander shine. Sometimes this is really obvious in like a Kindred style deck, where it's like, okay, all you have to do is just play lots of this one creature type, and you're like, oh, well, that's pretty easy. Or I want to play lots of instants and sorceries, or I want to have a lot of artifacts in play. Okay, I'm going to build my deck around satisfying this condition to help the commander do its job the best. But the main point is that it identifies an axis of attack for you to focus on, and then usually that synergizes well with the colors that it's present in. Now, let's talk about the perfect commander, the best one. There is one close second, which we will talk about shortly, but this is the best one, and it's not a real card. This is an arena specific card. This is Vivisa Orbital Overseer. This is the card that all of the requirements are based on because it does them the best. So Vivisa Orbital Overseer is colorless green, white, blue, 4/4 flying vigilance. Pretty good stat line, pretty good keywords for what it's trying to do. When Vivisa enters, conjure a card of your choice from the planet's spellbook onto the battlefield. That means choose Uthros, Titanic God Core, and put it into play tapped, or choose Evendo, Waking Haven, and put it into play tapped. I'll get back to that. And then the second line of text, whenever you attack, create a lander token. It becomes a 2/1 artifact creature and gains flying. Now, you play Farseek on 2, you play Vivisa on 3. Vivisa makes an Uthros or an Evendo. And if you played a Mana Dork on turn 1, they can attack and you create a lander token. Vivisa can attack and make a lander token every turn and still tap itself to station one of these lands, which is why it has Vigilance, and that's why it is perfect. And with the lander that it creates, that's only 2 turns of tapping all of your stuff to fully station a thing. So that's why its power is perfect. Now, the lander token that it creates is a 2/1 artifact creature, which Uthros says, I make blue for each artifact you control. And Evendo says, I make green for each creature you control. Perfect. It perfectly synergizes with the 2 main lands that you'll be picking from the planet spellbook. And then the last thing is that because Vivisa makes a land when you play it, if Vivisa gets destroyed immediately, you can go, okay, untap, play land for turn, here's Vivisa, I have another land. Oh, you killed Vivisa again? Cool, I untap, I play land, here's Vivisa again. And you can play Vivisa every single turn because you are getting an additional land to help you pay for the 2 additional commander cost. Like, you would never just not be able to have it in play because it always ramps you by 1. And it can also go, like, just get you to 6 lands, so you can play Primeval Titan on Arena, so to play Primeval Titan or whatever. And so I think this is the perfect commander. And so every other commander is judged by this lens. Only one other commander comes close. Everything else is worse. So this should, like, it has so much synergy. It communicates a game plan perfectly. It says, I want to play a lot of artifacts, or I want to play a lot of creatures. With the creatures version, I'm playing like a kind of Crater Hoof package, but I'm also playing like the Growing Rights of Itlamok. I play Gaia's Cradle, and you just go, okay, I want to play lots of guys. I want to attack, so I get extra landers, and then I'm trying to close out with Crater Hoof. With Uthros, I'm looking at Urza, which is the game finisher. I'm playing out lots of artifacts, so that Uthros makes lots of blue, and then I can activate Urza many, many times. I'm playing stuff like Training Grounds, so that Urza costs less to activate, and like that communicates the game plan really, really well. So let's get into our 3-color real commanders. There'll be another Bant one, don't worry, and talk about whether they successfully meet the criteria and how well they do that. Starting with Naya. So this is Bright Palm Soul Awakener. This is not as powerful as Vivisa. It's not as powerful as some of the other stuff that we're going to see on here, but I think it actually does a pretty good job of putting it all together. So Bright Palm Soul Awakener is a colorless red, green, white 4/3 Fox Shaman. It has backup 1. So when it enters, you can put a +1/+1 counter on itself or something else. If you put it on something else, it will gain the following text. Whenever this creature attacks, double the number of +1 counters on it, on target creature. So not on itself. It could be on anything. Never mind. That creature can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less this turn. So your goal is to make guys, turn them sideways, and bosh, basically. So let's look at the requirements. So cost 3 or 4 tick. Is 3 colors. This will always pass, and cost 3 or 4 will always pass. So I'm not going to go through this for every single one, because I have made sure that they meet these first 2 criteria. Has an impact on cast. So if you Lightning Bolt Bright Palm on the turn that I play it, the creature that it backed up onto, the creature that it threw it back onto, can still attack and can still have the double the +1/+1 counters on it. So that creature attacking still gets you the value of Bright Palm being played, and then has a lasting effect. So on the following turn, when Bright Palm attacks, it's still going to get the double +1/+1 counters trigger, and it's going to make something hard to be blocked. So, and it communicates a game plan. It says play Ozoliths. It says play creatures that care about having +1/+1 counters on them. So it does meet all the criteria. It is a good commander. But it's going to get blown out of the water because here is the Mardu commander. This is Seller's Rune Knight, and this is Vivisa's main rival. I'll tell you why. It has an impact on cast because when Celes enters, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards +1. That's crazy. I'm just going to filter through my deck super fast. Every time I cast Celes, I get to draw up to 8 cards. That sounds great. Perfect. Chef's kiss. Has a lasting effect. Okay, then let's look at the second line of text. Whenever one or more creatures you control enter, if one or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Read as, if that creature has persist, go infinite with a sack outlet. So, okay, that's crazy. If I'm reanimating something or I'm reanimating a persist creature, it can instantly go infinite with Celeste, who already puts things in the bin for me and draws cards. So what's the communicating the game plan? Alright, well, discard every other card from my hand that's not a reanimate spell until Murderous Redcap goes in the bin, cast the reanimate spell, win the game. That's a pretty straightforward game plan, actually. So this is also perfect. Chef's kiss. You can also just like blink this card for major value to just draw lots of cards. Or if you have the any of the like single black spells like Malakir Rebirth that make a comeback after it's been destroyed, your sack outlet suddenly says draw lots of cards. And it just goes crazy. So again, Seller's Runine, a real card, not an arena only card, is actually the real card that everything is going to be measured against, because this card is bonkers and everything else must be like this. Like, I want more things designed like this. So let's press on, because this is an easy slam dunk. Let's talk about Sultai. Now, CDC Brood Tyrant is actually my favorite Sultai commander, and that's because I cycled through a lot of them. We get an honorable mention to Teyval. Now, Teyval and CDC do something very similar, except Teyval does not do anything when it enters. Teyval only does stuff when it attacks. So that means Teyval goes in the 99 and CDC sits in the command zone. I also really like Kotsis, but not the I cast spells for free one, the one where I get to cast spells from the graveyard, Kotsis. But again, he does nothing on enters. He does stuff later on when you're trying to cast spells out of bin. That means he goes in the 99 and CDC is the commander. Same problem. But let's look at what CDC does. It is colorless green, black, blue. When it enters or attacks, mill 3 cards. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from your library, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. This is perfect for any Sultai graveyard combo. You play all the cards that mill yourself. You make zombies every time you do it. Whenever CDC enters, she makes a zombie. And whenever she attacks, she makes a zombie. Amazing. This is everything I want in a Sultai commander. So it has an impact on cast. It has a lasting effect in both when it attacks and also just passively whenever, in quotes, you make zombies. And it communicates a game plan. It says into your graveyard from your library. That is your game plan communicated right there. It's perfect. Chef's kiss. Everything else is not as good as CDC Brood Tyrant. Then we have the Jund Commander. This is Soul of Windgrace. This one is slightly more interesting to me because on Arena, they actually buffed this card to remove the colorless costs in its abilities. So I'm going to read it out like that, but I don't think it really matters. Soul of Windgrace is a 4-cost Jund Commander Cat Avatar 5/4. Whenever Soul of Windgrace enters or attacks, you may put a land from a graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. A graveyard, any of them. And then it has 3 abilities after that. One is green, one is red, one is black, where you can discard a land card and respectively gain 3 life, draw a card, or Windgrace gains indestructible and is tapped. This is amazing. It does the same thing Vivisa does, where every time you play it, it gets an additional land, so you can always have it in play. By staying ahead of the curve in the commander cost accumulating, which is pretty good. It has an impact on cast. It makes a land. It also has a lasting effect because it still makes a land when it attacks. And you can discard land cards to do extra things. So if Soul of Windgrace is in charge of all your lands getting put in play and you have a couple extra hand, that's pretty good. And it communicates a game plan. It says, I care about having lands in the bin. I care about having lands in hand. So you can either do kind of like what Hearthhull is trying to do, and Hearthhull is also an honorable mention, except it has no impact on cast, unless if you can station it. But the problem is, it still costs mana to activate its first effect, so it kind of didn't qualify enough, and so Solar Windgrace was just kind of better there. So that just means Hearthhole goes in the 99 for Solar Windgrace. They're both trying to do the same thing. And you're just playing all of the lands matters kind of cards. You can be doing like a Scapeshift type strategy, because if you have lands in the bin, Solar Windgrace is really happy about that. Or you can just be putting lands into your hand so that you can be discarding them and you gain lots of life, or discarding them and drawing cards and stuff like that. And you can play like that Badgersaw. There's like one where it's like whenever you discard a land, it does stuff. And then have like a when I discard things strategy, or a lands matter strategy, or anything like that. I think Solar Windgrace is great. Moving on to Bant. I did tell you there was another Bant commander. This is Derevi. This is actually one of the few that is 3 costed. Derevi is cracked. Derevi is all-time. It costs 3. It is 3 colors. It has an impact on cast. Now, Derevi is an interesting one because most of them say enters or attacks. Derevi says enters, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player. So when you cast Derevi, and also when you activate Derevi's ability to put it into play, but then again at the end of the combat step. So in your post-combat main, you can have a bunch of things untapped, because whenever it triggers, you may tap or untap target permanent. Derevi is just kind of crazy in general. It's very, very powerful. It has an impact on cast. It has a lasting effect, and it communicates a game plan. Now, it communicates a game plan is maybe the hardest one to sell for Derevi. When you look at the EDH rec page, a lot of people are just playing tribal birds for Derevi, which is blessed. I love you for that. And it's not as much, really, what I personally like to see from Derevi. There's a lot of cute cards that go kind of crazy, like Bloom Tender. You play Derevi, and then Derevi's trigger on the stack, you tap Bloom Tender for 3 mana, and then Derevi untaps it, so you can tap Bloom Tender for 3 mana, and now you have 6 mana on turn 3. That's pretty good, if you ask me. And then I just like a big ramp deck, honestly. But there's also like CEDH Derevi decks, so you're playing stuff like Stasis, Winter Orb, Winter Moon, where Derevi is untapping your lands and other players can't untap their lands, which also pretty good. So in the text that it has, communicates a game plan is that I can untap things where you normally cannot untap things, kind of works. But also like just untapping my lands to play more birds, also I guess kind of makes sense. It communicates the game plan the least strong. Like, you don't look at this and go, oh, I play lots of birds, or I play stasis. You look at this and you go, okay, it just gives me incremental value. So I still think Derevi is all time, but I think its weakest point is communicates a game plan. Now let's talk about the Abzan commander. This is Talia and the Gitrog monster. Cost 4, has first strike, death touch. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Whenever Talia and the Gitrog monster attacks, sacrifice a creature or land, then draw a card. It does everything. When it enters, Talia and the Gitrog monster enters, you still have priority, and so you can play an additional land. So it will always have an impact on cast. As it goes around the table, before it comes back to you, it has a lasting effect in that creatures and non-basic lands enter tapped. And then it still also has a lasting effect when you get to attack on your next turn, where you can be drawing cards by sacrificing your permanents. That's pretty good. Now, how does it communicate a game plan? Well, it does a little bit of both what Dahlia and Gitrog Monster does. That's where this kind of design series comes from. But you can be leaning more towards the Gitrog Monster side, where you want to be sacrificing lands, drawing cards. You can just play the Gitrog Monster in there, because he also does that. Whereas if you just also play Thalia in the deck, she also makes the lands enter tapped, an additional thing that you don't really need. Kind of jank, actually. And so I'm more inclined to lean more towards the play lots of lands kind of strategy, which I think is great. There is an arena commander called Hamza something or other. He costs 5, so automatic failure there. He is 3 colors, but he has landfall, and whenever you landfall, you manifest dread. I think this is a fantastically interesting design, except it's not regular manifesting dread. You are seeking out a creature card and manifesting it, so it will always be a creature that you could potentially turn face up. The problem is it has no impact on cast. And so that's like, I really wish to see that change to be like this. So it's like whenever Hamza enters or attacks, you seek a creature manifest trait or something like that. And so when you see more stuff like this, where it's like, okay, when I enter, you can play an additional land every turn, but like specifically this one, you will be able to play an additional land. I have a passive effect that slows my opponents down, and I have a passive effect that draws me cards. This just does so much, and this kind of is really good, in my opinion. And so let's move on to the Jeskai Commander. We're getting to the leg end of it. We're gonna see Grixis. We're gonna see Esper in a second. We're gonna see Temur, because Temur does have an entry here. It's just very bad. But let's talk about our Jeskai Commander. This is Satya Aetherflux Genius. It costs 4. It is 3 colors, and its text is Menace Haste. Whenever Satya Aetherflux Genius attacks, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of up to one other target non-token creature you control. You get 2 energy counters, and at the beginning of your next end step, sacrifice that token unless you pay an amount of energy equal to its mana value. So you can just always not pay, and that creature will still enter, be able to attack, and have an entrance effect because you're creating the token copy of it. So, has an impact on cast is the interesting one. If you play it and you don't make it to the combat step, Satya does nothing. But it has 5 toughness, so it is going to dodge some really cheap removal in the format. And then has a lasting effect. It's just like basically every combat I get to do this thing. So it's having haste is really the only way that we can argue that it does have an impact on cast, because you can get into combat on that first turn. And in theory, if everyone else is tapped out and you play it and it's kind of unlikely he's going to blow up, you are going to be able to get that extra value. And so, has a lasting effect. It can potentially just keep those tokens in play if you do pay for them, or just, you know, every other consequential turn where you are attacking, you are making more tokens, and then you can be playing stuff like Ocelot Pride, you know, as part of the Communicates a game plan, because Ocelot Pride is going to make copies of those tokens you created if you have the City's Blessing. And so you go, okay, do I want to play a token strategy? Do I just want to play an aggro strategy where I'm just playing Jeskai aggro and I'm making copies of a bunch of stuff? Do I want to play an energy counters strategy? Because Boros Energy is like one of the big modern decks right now. You can play a Giant, you can play Amped Raptor, you can play the artifact that lets you cast cards at the top of your deck, I think. And all that kind of stuff comes together to make Satya kind of do actually communicate a game plan. Now, again, it's kind of one of the weaker ones compared to some of the other options on this list, but it's still the best Jeskai Commander for doing such a thing. Now, before I move into the dogshit tier commanders, there's some other honorable mentions. Like, I actually really do like the new Spider-Man ones, where it's on the front, it costs 2, and on the back, it's the 3 color card, and the 2 cost one that actually does something interesting and relevant. I think they're great, and I want more of them as well. But it doesn't kind of, you know, fit the bits here. Like Peter Parker also is kind of perfect because it is just 4 on the back, but it doesn't have an impact on cast unless if you're playing it on the front side, and then you have to transform it later. So really, it costs 6. It's not quite there, but I do like them a lot. And there's a lot of other like niche small things that do kind of meet the requirements or come close, but these ones upcoming were the best I could find, and still aren't really there. So let's talk about the Grixis Commander. This is Marchesa, the Black Rose. I actually made a video where she got a mention because I designed a LeBlanc from League of Legends. I have no idea when that's scheduled. Maybe it's out, maybe you should watch it, maybe it's not out, maybe you should eagerly anticipate it. But basically, I really like the dethrone mechanic for Commander. It adds interesting politics and stuff to the game. But let's talk about if she meets the requirements. It costs 4. It has dethrone, so whenever this creature attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And also your other creatures you control have dethrone. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. So this one is also really interesting. It has a bunch of, like, not infinite because it is next end step, but really strong synergy cards with stuff that does kind of automatically put counters on itself. But also the idea is actually very similar to the Naya commander that we mentioned earlier, where it comes in and it's requiring you to have other creatures that are going to be attacking to get the benefit straight away. She doesn't inherently protect herself unless if you gave her haste and she gets a +1 counter from attacking, or you put a +1 counter on her in some way, and so then she might just get removed immediately and not actually have an impact on cast. But if you are able to safely get into the combat step, all your creatures swing in, they'll get counters on them. Any creatures that die in the combat step will come back at the beginning of the next end step. You can potentially get extra entrance triggers and stuff like that. And so this was just kind of as good as I could get. You could argue that it doesn't really have an impact on cast. It does have a lasting effect, and it does communicate a game plan where it says, hey, +1/+1 counters. And it's also interesting to me because it's a, hey, +1/+1 counters deck that's not in green, not in white. The two main +1/+1 counters kind of strategy cards. So I think it also communicates a deck building challenge, which is kind of cool. But I want to talk about what the perfect Grixis commander could be. Could be, maybe. The perfect Grixis command is actually Rusko Clockmaker, where we rule 0 it to have partner, so I can have Rograk for red identity. I know, it's stupid, but Rusko is the perfect Grixis commander, and I just wish I had a way to play red in that deck with him, because Rusko cost 4, is not 3 colors. But when it enters, you conjure a card named Midnight Clock onto the battlefield, which is great. So, same thing as Bavisa, he's going to help you ramp, except Midnight Clock is slightly better than a land. Now, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an hour counter on each permanent you control named Midnight Clock. So every additional time you cast Rusko, you get more Midnight Clocks, and every time you cast a non-creature spell after Rusko, all of your Midnight Clocks get value. And then when Midnight Clock hits 12 hour counters, you get 7 new cards into your hand, which is really good. But also, whenever you're casting a non-creature spell, Rusko also makes each opponent lose 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that really clearly communicates a game plan. It just meets all the requirements, but it's just not a Grixis commander. It's a Dimir commander, and it would be so perfect if it was a Grixis commander. So there's just like so many 2-color commanders that like really come close. Like Tanuk, I mentioned earlier, also is the same. If there was literally just like a single blue partner or something like that, where it just comes close. And I also wanted to take this time to mention that partners just kind of fail across the board. My issue is that you go, okay, I'm going to pick a commander that matches the gameplay strategy I'm trying to play, right? Which is kind of normally how you do it. You go, okay, I want to play an aggro +1/+1 counter strategy. What colors do I want to be in? Bant. Okay, I'm going to play Tidus, right? And that kind of is how it flows. You look through the list and you go, okay, it kind of matches the aggro style deck that I want to play. With partners, you go, sick. I found one partner that works with the game plan I'm trying to play, and then now I'm going to look for what is the actual colors of that strategy and find the partner that matches. Oh, every single other partner is dog shit for the strategy and the colors that I'm trying to play. So you're always playing one partner just for color, hence Rograk, doing Rograk things like Rog Thras. Rograk is just there to get sacrificed to Flare of Duplication and also make Gaia's Cradle tap for 1 green. And that's it. And that's stupid. And instead, you should just have a good Thrasios or something like Thrasios that just happens to have red in it. We just need more 3-color commanders designed that actually do the things that people are trying to do in playing 3 colors, instead of partner, which got like really close, but you don't actually have enough partners. We either need lots more partners, we need the ability to have everyone have partner, or actually good 3-color designed commanders. We're just so close to all of these things coming together. So I feel like this is a worthwhile honorable mention, drawing your attention to it. But now, for the nail in the coffin of my previous video, we're going to talk about the one Temur commander that met the requirements. This is Omnath, Locus of the Royal. And it's actually extra funny because I talked a lot about these requirements in the description of the video, and no one mentioned Omnath, Locus of the Royal. Everyone wanted to mention really expensive creatures like Miram, which cost 6, doesn't have an impact on cast, and communicates a game plan of, hello, cast a 5 or 6 mana dragon after Miram. So, okay, it does something on when you have 12 mana. I don't think that's very good. Or Riku of the 2 reflections. Okay, Riku costs 5. You must pay 2 to copy a spell, and then cast a spell that does something helpful. So you're looking at 7 mana minimum to copy something, and then casting, let's say the spell costs 5. Oh, what turn is that happening on again, right? So he has to get all the way around the board before anything relevant happens, and it's just kind of not good. Whereas Omnath, Locus of the World, is the only thing that comes close. Now, I have a bunch of problems with Omnath, but let's talk about his text box first. So, when Omnath, Locus of the World, enters the battlefield, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of elementals you control. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target elemental you control. If you control 8 or more lands, draw a card. This would be perfect if it was not an elemental tribal commander. There's just not enough good elementals to build out a whole deck in a way that I think is actually, like, this is the only Teemo commander. So if you want to play Teemo colors, you must play elemental tribal, because there is no other option available to you, is kind of the problem here. I've looked at every Teemo commander. Most of them suck. Most of them are too slow, don't have an impact on cast, and they're kind of relying on you having a lasting effect, which is really tough because a lot of the ways to protect for free are in white. I think you don't have access to. Or you're just relying on playing really powerful counter spells like Force of Will just to keep my commander alive because he didn't do anything yet, which kind of also really sucks big time. So what Omnath really says is when it enters, deal 1 damage to something. Okay, I'll kill your Esper Sentinel. And then whenever a land comes in, Omnath gets bigger. But then if I have 8 or more lands, I also get to draw a card. Okay. And so I actually played this on Brawl for a long time as my chosen guy because I really like the Teemo colors in playing in that format. Because there's a lot of cards that I like that kind of work together. You can play Cascade strategy because you have access to all the Cascade cards and stuff. And just try and play like a value good stuff kind of deck, or you play like a really good ramp kind of deck where you're like, okay, here's some big haymakers, because all the really good storms, most of the really good storm spells, there's no Tendrils of Agony, but you get Mizzix Mastery, you get Mind's Desire, and so you can kind of ramp, and then Omnath being like, well, I care if you have 8 lands now, then you can start drawing casters, start drawing those storm cards. It kind of does work. I do kind of like how that comes together, but it still says play elementals, and I'm not wanting to play elementals. Also, like, the Lorwyn sets aren't available on Arena, so most of the good elementals you don't even have access to, which kind of blows hard, may I add. So it's just not good. It just most other Teemo commanders failed these requirements, and for Omnath to be the only one that passes is frustrating, and that's why there is no good Teemo commanders, because I don't think this is a good Teemo commander. But I want more stuff like this. You could literally just remove where it says elementals in the body text, and suddenly it's a good card. And again, that's kind of my problem with it. And that's why I want more. And look, in that video, I designed a bunch of elements that are really goofy, and it's like kind of making big swings at other different directions that you could take a Teemo commander in. Some of them obviously aren't really feasible, and some of them are just kind of more of an interesting discussion about what more unexplored space we should kind of see. But like, compared to Seller's Rune Knight, this card is dog shit. Seller's, like, is the backbone, is the star of the show in doing everything. What is Omnath? Omnath is nothing. Is nothing. Now, let's talk about Esper. I've bullied Teemo enough. It's time to talk about Esper. Now, there was one card that met the requirements, and there is a second card that sort of meets the requirements. Now, let's talk about the Esper Commander Tolu's Clever Conductor. It costs 3, but also you could play mono blue to cast it based on the hybrid mana. When Tolu's Clever Conductor enters the battlefield, it connives, which is draw a card then discard a card. If you discard a non-land card, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile them. When Tolu's dies, put those cards exiled into your hand. So, it costs 3. It is 3 colors. It has an impact on cast of you drawing a card and discarding a card. It has a lasting effect where whenever you discard cards, Toulouse will hold them for you, and then when Toulouse dies, they get put into your hand. So you want her to die at some point. This is like one of the few commanders where you do actually like eventually really want it to die. This is basically a dogshit Bomat courier, unfortunately. But my main issue with it is communicates a game plan. What is the game plan? I want to discard lots of cards, but then I don't even get them into my hand. I have to sacrifice my commander to get them into my hand. My commander just represents a bag of holding kind of effect. And if I get Path of Exiled on my commander, I don't get any of those cards, actually. It's really bad. What if I played lots of Connive creatures? Is that the game plan that it's trying to communicate to me? Do I want to play Norman Osborne? Well, no, he's in Grixis. He's, I play Legislator, I play what? There is another Esper Commander that basically does the same thing. It's like whenever you attack, you connive, but it has kind of the same argument problem as Marchesa, whereas this one actually does something when it enters. So it's slightly more meets the requirements, but it's just not good. It just doesn't do anything. You could maybe argue that you're trying to play Reanimator because you're putting cards into the bin, but then you can't even reanimate them because they get put into your hand. So it's like, what is Toulouse doing here? It's just so shit. It's just nowhere near Seller's Runite, which says discard 7 cards, draw 8 cards. Where is that? Where is that in the body text of this? No, it says draw 1 card. So it's just bad. It's just so bad. But let's talk about the honorable mention. This is Y'shtola. Now, I looked at Y'shtola and I originally dismissed her because she doesn't have an enters, right? She might do nothing on the turn that you play her. It basically says at the end step, if a player lost 4 or more life, you draw a card. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with CMC 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to something and you gain 2 life. So that's really interesting. Now, I started a deck list. I made a list, and bonus points if you can guess what all these cards have in common. You may pick out some really iconic ones and be able to guess what it is pretty quickly. But there are some more niche ones in here. If you've played Legacy, you probably know what most of these cards do. But basically, she will have an effect on the turn that you play her if you cast one of these spells. Because these are all of the non-creature spells, the instants and sorceries. There was a couple of artifacts with the border posts, but I didn't think that was worth it. Because it also costs mana, and Dismember is the exception here. It's the only one that costs at least 1 mana. Everything else you can play completely for free. But whenever you cast one of these non-creature spells, Y'shtola deals the damage, you gain life, and then potentially you're also drawing a card on your turn based on which one it was. So it's kind of possible for it to actually have an on-board impact. You cast Y'shtola on turn 3 after you've played Arcane Signet, and then you snuff out something, and then Y'shtola is going to draw you a card at the end of your turn because you paid 4 life. But then also Y'shtola triggers dealing 2 to someone and then you gaining 2. So it kind of works. Is the game plan communicated? This 40 card list? I don't think so. But that's the best we got. That's kind of it. And then, like, pretty much every other card is you just need to fill up your hand as fast as possible, because most of these are, like, discard 2 cards. And also you need a way to play islands really fast, because 4 of these cards are, like, return an island from play to your hand, which means you just have no lands in play ever. It's kind of bad. It's kind of bad. But that's it. This is the best Esper Commander according to the guidelines I set out at the beginning of the video. It's really difficult to make any of the others fit. A lot of the other ones just have a whenever clause or cost too much, or like that's kind of the problem. And when you compare everything to Vivisa, when you compare everything to Seller's Runite, it's really hard to find other stuff that works good. But I think the reasons for each of the requirements of, is this a good commander, like really does make sense. I want my guy to do something when it enters, because if I'm playing something that's so scary and I go, well, I cast my guy, but no, I have to counter that. I lose the game unless I counter that. And there's a few commanders that are like that, where it just runs away with the game so fast, or it, like Ureni is a good example, but Ureni costs 8, I think, and so it just goes and finds a dragon and plays it, and then if you attack again, you get to play more dragons, and it's like, well, I don't want you to get a second dragon for free. Maybe I'll counter your thing. You're like, well, it costs 8 mana. I'm not casting it again for 10, and that's kind of the problem. And so some of these really expensive commanders need to have like a really, really big impact. There's some other stuff like Carador, where Carador could cost 4 if you had a bunch of guys in the bin, but on the turn that you play Carador, it doesn't really have any impact unless if you can actually cast that additional creature. So there's like a lot of hoops, and there's a lot of commanders that don't have to jump through those hoops to do stuff. So realistically, my wish is to see a Sidisi Brood Tyrant in every color, color 3 pair. Is there a word? Thruple. Every color thruple. Thank you. Where it has an enters and attacks effect, which does something minor. Like we could have a Bant one, which is whenever it enters and attacks, but a +1/+1 count on all creatures you control, or something stupid. And then a secondary effect, which is a whenever clause. And like Ishtola kind of does that, where it's got the whenever clause that's just really good, but it's not an enters, it's an at the end step. So Ishtola has to survive onto the end step. And so that's where something like Flawless Maneuver is really good. Or if you have a couple of creatures down earlier, something like the Flares or free counter spells do help you get a lot of the way through your turn. But it's still tenuous. It doesn't compare to a lot of the other stuff. It doesn't hold up to Soul Wind Grace. And I just want more commanders to be designed like that, because I think that is the peak of commander. I think that is really what I want out of the experience. Whenever I am playing a 2-color deck, I'm like, man, I wish I had access to this thing. And like for me, the Temur experience, I want to be playing a Temur commander that has Tanuk in it and has VV Onatir in it. I think VV is horrible in the command zone, but I think VV is great in the 99. And a lot of the problems are solved by, oh, but I love this commander. I'm like, that's fine. Ureni is still a good card. Ureni is better in the 99. Miram is better in the 99. If Miram dies, you go, oh, well, that sucks. Here's my next thing. Instead of, oh, the card I built the entire deck around didn't get to do its one thing. That kind of also sucks. So it's better to have a low-costed commander that has an impact and helps set up that game plan of play lots of dragons. And that's kind of why I, in that video, I did design some stuff where it's like, basically, this is a ramp spell in the command zone and stuff like that to kind of make Ureni be more playable, make Miram be more playable by consistently setting up for it, rather than relying on the Haymaker to actually be the play. And some exceptions are obviously like Grip Hug commanders kind of don't need to be like this, because you're accessing politics in a different angle. You are like, most of those big expensive guys like Riku, for example, requires you to untap for it to do anything. So the politics part of it is like, hey, let me please let my commander do what its thing does, which it's not really a bargain. Begging is not politics. Bargaining is politics. And so it's kind of hard to bargain like that. Whereas if you're kind of already set up for it, or if you kind of, or playing the Grip Hug deck is like, well, my whole thing is politics. I have things I can offer you if you let Miss Bumbleflower stay in play. And so there's just like so many Bant ones that do actually meet the list. There's like actually 4 or 5. I just picked Derevi because I didn't want to sit on Bant the entire time because it's the color combo that I like. But Grixis and Esper both are kind of designed out like having the big guy that adds this really oppressive state. Like Nekuzar is a really good example. But if Nekuzar just gets deleted instantly, then Nekuzar doesn't do anything. And so that's kind of the problem. Now look, I talk a lot about game design on this channel. I have started designing some custom Magic cards on this channel. So I am actually like really engrossed in what is fun, what is the joy exchange when it comes to designing experiences for card games and stuff like that. That said, if you have a commander that you think meets these requirements, let me know in the comments. There's lots that I've missed for sure, and I kind of just picked one for each color, but especially if you have something like that, or if you have suggestions of what a design might be in these colors that stick to the color identity, that kind of fit on theme, that meet all the requirements, that would also be a really cool custom card that I would like to see. So, you know, get involved, harass me in the comments. It's always a good time. And that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully this gives you some ideas about what deck building and playing in Commander could be like at its apex, and I'll see you in the next one.